The voice on the radio is calm. The information sounds official, and for a moment, you feel safer. But there's a problem. The radio doesn't know what's happening outside your window. It only knows what someone managed to report. And during a fast-moving disaster, that gap can make you dangerously confident in a situation you don't actually understand. You wake up to the sound of rain hitting the windows. The power is already gone. Your phone has been searching for a signal for almost an hour, and the battery is dropping faster than you'd like. So you reach for the emergency radio. You turn the dial. Static. Then, suddenly, a voice. The broadcaster is giving an update about the storm. Several roads are closed. Residents are being advised to remain indoors. Emergency crews are responding. You listen carefully. For the first time that morning, you feel like you understand what's happening. And that feeling is important, because the radio has just given you something the darkness couldn't. A story. The storm has a name. Roads are damaged. Emergency crews are responding, and you've been told to stay inside. So you make a decision. You stay. For the next few hours, the radio becomes your connection to the outside world. Every update makes you feel a little more informed. But while the radio is making you feel more informed, something important is happening outside its reach. It cannot see your street. It cannot know whether the water rising 3 blocks away is moving toward you. That's the hidden weakness of emergency broadcasting. The information can be useful while still being incomplete, and that's where the radio becomes psychologically dangerous. The more information you receive, the more informed you feel. But feeling informed and actually understanding what's happening are two very different things. An emergency radio is valuable. In a major outage, it may be one of the few ways to receive information when phones, internet connections, and television are unavailable. But a broadcast is not a window into reality. It's a report about reality. That distinction becomes enormous during a fast-moving emergency. Imagine a large storm moving through a city. A broadcaster may know that flooding has been reported in several areas. They may know that a major road has closed. They may know that emergency services are responding. But they may not know that the smaller road near your home has just become impassable, or that the evacuation route mentioned earlier has already become dangerous. Before that warning reaches your radio, it has already passed through several hands. Someone has to notice the problem. Someone has to report it. Someone has to assess it. Only then does it become the message you hear. And every step takes time. During a slow-moving emergency, that delay might be harmless. During a rapidly changing one, it can become the difference between making a safe decision and making a dangerous one.
By afternoon, the storm is getting worse. You turn the radio back on. The broadcaster says conditions remain difficult, but emergency services are responding. You hear the phrase, "shelter in place." It sounds reassuring, so you stay where you are. Then you notice something the radio hasn't mentioned. Water is beginning to collect near the entrance to your street. You watch it for several minutes. It doesn't look serious. Not yet. The broadcast continues. There is no mention of your neighborhood. That silence is easy to interpret as good news. If there were a serious problem, you assume, someone would say something. But that assumption can be dangerous. Silence doesn't necessarily mean nothing is happening. It can simply mean nobody has reported it yet. It could mean the information hasn't reached the broadcaster. Officials could still be trying to determine what's happening. Or the problem may simply be too localized to appear in a general update. This is where an emergency radio can create a subtle psychological trap. It gives you information, and information feels like control. But receiving information is not the same thing as having complete situational awareness. Several hours later, the voice on the radio finally tells you something that changes your plans. A major road has been closed because of flooding. You recognize the road immediately. It's the route you were considering using to reach a safer area. The broadcaster says the closure happened recently, but you don't know exactly how recently. You don't know whether nearby roads are also affected, and you don't know whether conditions are getting better or worse. Now you have a decision to make. Stay where you are? Leave? Wait for another update? The radio has given you information, but it hasn't given you certainty. And that's something emergency preparedness often overlooks. A piece of information can be accurate and still be insufficient for the decision you're trying to make. The road really is closed. That doesn't tell you whether your alternative route is safe. The storm really is moving east. That doesn't tell you what's happening on your street. The evacuation order really was issued 2 hours ago. That doesn't tell you whether the route you planned to use is still open. Accurate information can still produce a dangerous decision when it's missing the detail that matters to you. Accuracy and completeness are not the same thing. And even if the information is useful, there's another problem. You have to keep the radio running long enough to receive it. Your emergency radio may have a rechargeable battery. Maybe it has replaceable batteries. Maybe it has a hand crank or a small solar panel. But none of those options make energy unlimited. If the emergency lasts for days, every hour you leave the radio running becomes a resource decision. You may need that same power for your phone, flashlight, medical equipment, or other essential devices. And if you keep the radio running continuously because you're afraid of missing an important update, you may be using the resource that makes the radio useful in the first place. The radio may be one of your most useful tools, but it's still a tool with limitations. The mistake isn't owning the radio. The mistake is treating it as though the radio itself solves the information problem. It doesn't. It only gives you one source of information. That becomes obvious when you move. You carry the radio toward the back of the house. The signal becomes weaker. You adjust the antenna. Static. You move again. The voice returns, then disappears. This is another problem that can be easy to overlook. Radio reception depends on the specific equipment, frequency, antenna, terrain, buildings, interference, and location. A radio that works perfectly in one room may perform differently somewhere else. And in some emergencies, the broadcasting infrastructure itself can be damaged or disrupted. That means you cannot assume that because your radio worked during a test at home, it will always work when conditions become difficult. Testing matters. Understanding your equipment matters. Knowing which stations are relevant to your area matters. And having more than one way to receive information matters even more. But here's the part most people get wrong. The most dangerous radio message isn't necessarily false. It can be completely accurate and still lead you toward the wrong decision. Imagine hearing that emergency officials have opened a shelter. You hear the location. You hear that it's accepting residents. You immediately begin preparing to leave. But the broadcast doesn't tell you everything you need to know. You don't know how crowded the route is. You don't know whether the roads around the shelter are passable. You don't know whether conditions have changed since the announcement. You don't know what happened in the 10 minutes between the report and the moment you heard it. The information may be correct. Your conclusion may still be wrong. That is the difference between information and situational awareness. Situational awareness requires context. You have to combine what you hear with what you can observe, what you already know about the environment, and what has changed since the information was released. The radio should inform your decision. It should not make the decision for you. This is the part most people get backwards. The danger isn't necessarily that the radio gives you bad information. The deeper danger is believing that good information must be complete. It doesn't. A professional emergency response system understands this problem. Information is collected from multiple sources. Reports are compared. Conditions are monitored. Situations are reassessed.
Plans change as new information arrives. You should approach your own emergency information in a similar way. Not because every broadcast is unreliable, because no single source can see everything. The radio can tell you what has been reported. Your eyes can tell you what's happening outside. Official alerts tell you what authorities are asking people to do. Maps give you the geography. And your preparation determines how much time you actually have to respond. No single source gives you the whole picture, but together they can get much closer. There's also a psychological reason people become overly dependent on the radio. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. When you don't know what's happening, you want an answer. The radio provides one. That can reduce anxiety, and reducing anxiety feels good. But feeling calmer doesn't necessarily mean your understanding has improved. Sometimes the most dangerous moment is when you become comfortable enough to stop looking for additional information. You hear a reassuring update. You relax. You stop checking the environment or considering alternatives. You begin assuming the situation is under control. Then conditions change. This is false reassurance, and it can be more dangerous than obvious bad news because obvious danger keeps you alert. A reassuring message can make you lower your guard. The solution isn't to throw the radio away. It's to use it for what it's actually good at. A radio can provide broad situational information when other communication systems are unavailable. It can tell you about major developments. It can give you official instructions. It can help you understand the larger situation. But before acting on any broadcast, ask yourself one question. How does this information apply to where I actually am? If flooding has been reported in your area, compare that information with what you can actually see around you. If a road is closed, don't assume the alternative route is safe. And if conditions are supposedly improving, ask whether that matches what you're actually observing. The goal isn't to ignore the broadcast. It's to put the broadcast into context. Because the radio can tell you what has been reported, it can't tell you exactly what's happening at your location. And if the broadcast conflicts with what you can clearly observe, don't automatically assume one side must be correct. The information may simply be describing different parts of a rapidly changing situation. This is why redundancy matters. Your radio shouldn't be your only source of information. It should be one layer in a larger system. Redundancy means you don't depend on one source to understand what's happening. Know your official information sources before an emergency begins. Understand the geography around your home. Have alternate routes and paper maps available. Establish communication plans with people you trust. And keep enough radio power in reserve to receive important updates when conditions change. The goal isn't to collect as many information sources as possible. It's to make sure that when one source becomes incomplete, delayed, or unavailable, you have another way to understand what's happening. None of this requires you to ignore the radio. It requires you to stop treating the radio as an all-seeing authority, because it isn't. It's a messenger, and a messenger can only deliver the information it receives. Go back to the beginning. The voice on the radio is calm. The information sounds official, and for a moment, you feel safer. That feeling isn't the problem. The problem begins when the feeling of being informed becomes stronger than your awareness of what you don't know. That's when the radio can become dangerous. Not because the radio is trying to mislead you, not because emergency broadcasts are useless, and not because official information should be ignored. The danger comes from forgetting the gap between the broadcast and reality. The radio tells you what has been reported. Reality is what's happening outside your window. During a slow emergency, that gap may be small. During a fast-moving one, it can widen quickly. And if your decision depends on information that's already behind the situation,
you may act confidently at exactly the wrong moment. The safest approach is not to choose between trusting the radio and ignoring it. Use it as one piece of a larger picture. Listen for official updates. Check how those updates match the conditions around you. Look for changes. Verify important information when possible. Keep backup ways to receive information. And, most importantly, understand what the radio cannot know. Because the radio tells you what someone knows, it cannot tell you everything you need to know. And when the world outside is changing faster than the broadcast can keep up, that difference can determine what you do next. Because the systems you trust most may have limitations you never thought about. And that's exactly what we'll keep uncovering. Subscribe.